more spending, and more taxes. Rather, it would encourage private sector job growth by getting government the heck out of the way. And by ensuring greater economic stability in the future, it would have to maintain the conditions for robust job creation. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, I'd like to follow on the speech just made by my friend and colleague from Utah about the current state of unemployment in America and what to do about it. One of the last things he says is get government out of the way. I would like to suggest that maybe, if he has some time, and I know he's a very busy man, he joined me in a trip to Peoria, Illinois, where I was last week visiting Lucas and Sons Steel Company. This company's been in business since 1857. It has 26 employees. The CEO is a delightful, dynamic young woman named Margaret Hanley. She has, as I said, 26 union employees, all iron workers, and what she does is fabricate steel for construction projects all over the Midwest and as far away as Antarctica. As I said, the company's been around over 150 years, and she prides herself in the fact, I asked her, where do you get your steel? She said, it's all American steel. How you doing? I asked her, and she said, great. And then she says, one of the reasons we're doing great is because of President Obama's stimulus package. The president said to American businesses like hers, you can borrow money at low interest rates to buy new machinery that will help you be more competitive. She said, come on, let me show you. We walked in the other room, and here was a computer-driven machine as big as a small room being handled by a fella that was literally taking steel girders, boring holes in them and bending them where they're supposed to be bent. She said, I can compete with the big boys with this. We're going to double the number of people working at Lucas and Sons Steel. Senator Hatch says, government, get out of the way. Thank goodness government was there for that company, a private company paying a living wage with decent benefits that's been around for a century and a half and is prospering because they're making quality products out of American steel with equipment that they bought through President Obama's stimulus package. How many times do we hear Senator McConnell come to the floor and say the president's stimulus package was a punchline on nighttime TV? Well, it isn't a punchline in Peoria. It's dead serious because people are working, making a good wage because of the investment in small business through government help. Now, I believe, and most Americans believe, real job creation is going to be in the private sector. Well, look what happened here. Because of the investment of government helping her to buy this machinery and be competitive, production, manufacturing jobs stayed right here in the United States. And that's what we want. 14 million people out of work. And as I travel up and down my state of Illinois, I visited some days with those who are unemployed, desperately trying to find jobs, and other days with businesses like Lucas and Sons Steel in Peoria that are doing well. And I asked them the key to their success. And they basically say that they've been lucky to have good products and great workers and great infrastructure. Get government out of the way, Senator Hatch says. But government has to be in the way for infrastructure. It's government that builds the highways, the bridges, the airports, the railroads. That's part of what the government is investing in for the future of our economy. Part of President Obama's jobs package is to put Americans back to work rebuilding basic infrastructure. We need it. We need it all across the Midwest and across the nation. And if you think we can afford to get government out of the way and not invest in infrastructure, take a look at what's going on in China today. In China, our #1 competitor in the world and our #1 creditor in the world, they are building right and left. They're preparing for the 21st century. They're going to build 50 new airports, Madam President, in the next 5 years that will accommodate every plane of every size made by Boeing aircraft. That's how big these airports are. 50 new ones. They're building the infrastructure to not only compete but pass the United States. And when my colleagues on the other side come to the floor and say, get government out of the way, what do they mean? That we shouldn't be investing in infrastructure to make America strong for the 21st century? That the businesses large and small in Illinois that need modern, safe highways to move their goods back and forth to market shouldn't be turning to government for that help? It makes no sense. Historically, we have agreed on a bipartisan basis when it comes to infrastructure. We should agree again, and that is part of the President's jobs bill. Let me tell you what else is in there. We know that America's working families are struggling paycheck to paycheck. They took a survey recently and they asked working families in America, how many of your families could come up with $2,000 in 30 days, either out of your savings or borrow it? Now that isn't an unreasonable amount of money. A very moderate injury at an emergency room might cost you $2,000. So they asked them, and it turned out that only half, a little over half, of working families had access to $2,000. It shows you how close to the edge many families are living. It shows you that many of them are surviving paycheck to paycheck. Though they work hard, they just can't seem to get ahead. President Obama's Jobs Act says this: these working families deserve a payroll tax cut of 2%. What would that mean? 2% doesn't sound like much, but look what it means in Illinois. Our average wage in Illinois is about $53,000 a year. The 2% payroll tax cut would give to these families between $125 and $130 a month. A senator may not miss that amount of money, but for a lot of working families, it's the difference between filling your gas tank and buying the shoes for the kids to go to school. So the president's payroll tax cut puts money in the hands of working families to buy the goods and services to get the economy moving forward. And what else does the president suggest? He suggests in his Jobs Act that we need to provide tax incentives for small businesses to hire the unemployed. One of the things he said, the president said when he spoke to us, is we ought to make sure that every veteran who served our country can find a job when they get home by offering incentives for businesses to hire returning soldiers. That's government involved. We create that incentive. The Republican side says, get government out of the way. I don't think so. These men and women who served our country, who risked their lives, who fought for America, should not have to come home and fight for a job and lose that fight. We ought to stand by them and help them find work. That is part of President Obama's jobs bill, and it's a reasonable part. Cutting the payroll taxes, cutting the taxes that businesses, small businesses pay so they're more profitable and can hire more people is a reasonable thing to do. I was amused that the senator from Utah brought up one of my issues that I've worked on, and that is the debit card swipe fee. If you use a debit card to make a purchase at a restaurant, a grocery store, a drugstore, bookstore, whatever it happens to be, and they swipe that card, the retailer that you've just bought that good or service from has to pay a fee to the bank and major credit card company. It turns out that the fee, the so-called swipe fee, is dramatically larger than the actual cost of the transaction to the bank and credit card company. Let me give you some numbers. The Federal Reserve investigated, and here's what they found. To use a debit card to make a purchase costs the bank and credit card company somewhere between 4 cents and 12 cents. That's to process everything. For you to take money out of your checking account with a debit card to pay for a purchase, what do they charge? On average, they charge the retailer 44 cents. Somewhere between 600% and 400% of their actual cost. So what we did is to say that retailers across America deserve a break. With the Federal Reserve establishing the number, we said a reasonable fee is about 24 cents. That splits the difference, which is the common outcome in Washington. It gives the banks more than they actually have to expend to process, but it doesn't hit the retailers hard. I went to the Rock Island Country Market when I was back home, downstate Illinois. Carl, the manager, talked about his morning special, cup of coffee and a donut at the country market, 99 cents. He says, Senator, do you know what it feels like when somebody hands me a debit card for that 99-cent transaction? I not only didn't break even, I lost money, and I'll lose it every time. We've got to give retailers a fighting chance. And when the senator from Utah comes to the floor and says that we shouldn't do that we should stand by the Wall Street banks and the credit card companies, I think he's lost sight of the fact that Main Street, not Wall Street, is where jobs are created in America. Helping retailers, large and small, be profitable, be able to reduce prices on their goods, and hire more people is the way for us to emerge from this situation and have more people working across America. Now, there's great controversy associated with the fact that President Obama made a suggestion when he spoke to us about the jobs bill and when he said to us, I'm going to pay for it. Whatever I do in this jobs bill, whether it's extending unemployment benefits, payroll tax cuts for working families, a break for small businesses to hire veterans and other unemployed people, we're going to pay for it. We're not going to add this to the deficit. And he came up with a plan to do it. I thought his plan was reasonable, but we've talked on the Democratic Senate caucus side and come up with a plan that is more acceptable to our caucus, and I can accept it too. Here's what it is. It's a little over 5% surcharge on people who are making over $1 million a year. 5% surcharge on their income tax. These are people that are making $20,000 a week. $20,000 a week. And the President has suggested they should pay their fair share, and we have come up with a more specific approach. A little over 5% surtax to pay for what it will take to get the Jobs Act moving forward and get the economy moving forward, which will be to everyone's benefit, rich and poor alike, across America. Well, you would think we'd said something heretical. The protests that were received from the Republican side of the aisle in the House and the Senate. What I find interesting about their opposition to this is when you ask the American people point blank, do you think to pay for the President's jobs bill to get people back to work, it is reasonable to close tax loopholes and ask millionaires to pay a little more on their income tax? Here's what the poll says. 64%, almost 2 out of 3 Americans, support raising taxes on millionaires. How about independents? ABC News poll, 75% support raising taxes on millionaires. But what about Republicans? 57% of Republicans support raising taxes on millionaires. And hang on tight, 55% of Tea Party supporters agree with raising taxes on millionaires. It turns out that the majority of Americans at every political level believes this is a reasonable proposal. The only problem is we can't find a Republican senator or House member who agrees. And they've said they'll just vote against anything that includes a penny more taxes for those who are making over $1 million a year. I think Americans believe that we're all in this together. Everyone has to sacrifice. Families sacrifice every day. Businesses are sacrificing, trying to stay open and prosper in a rough and challenging economy. And it's not unreasonable to ask those who are doing well off in America to pay a little more so that we can get this economy moving forward and create jobs. 2 other points that were raised by the senator from Utah I'd like to address. One of them is he said he's against the Wall Street reform package we passed. Do you remember? It hasn't been that long ago when we were told by the previous president that if we didn't provide almost $800 billion of taxpayers' money to the biggest banks in America, they would fail and the economy would crater. It's a day I'll never forget because it's a stark choice. Take $800 billion out of our treasury with all our debt and give it to Wall Street banks or run the risk of our economy collapsing? Well, many of us said we'll stand with President Bush's proposal. We'll see if we can keep these banks afloat. Do you remember the thank you note we got from the major bankers across America for $800 billion in TARP funds? They gave bonuses, $1 million bonuses to their top officers. The same people who were in charge that drove their banks into the ground and drove the economy into the ground, that forced the taxpayers' bailout, were ending up with millions of dollars in bonuses. Well, we decided with Wall Street reform to say once and for all, we are not going down this road again. This notion that some of these Wall Street banks and bigger banks are too big to fail has got to come to an end. So we passed the Wall Street reform to try to straighten up some of the abuses that led to this recession. We didn't get a single vote on the Republican side of the aisle. Not one. They don't want the government to exercise any power of oversight to police the ranks of those in the financial industry who are not dealing with this situation responsibly. That's their position. I happen to believe that government has a legitimate role. Boy, when those banks were about to fail, they loved government. They couldn't wait to get our money. They got the money, they survived, gave one another bonuses, and then we said, now you got to clean up your act, and they said, get out of the way. Government's nothing but a big old problem. Well, the American people know better. We want Wall Street and the big banks to be held accountable. We never want to go down this road again to this bailout. And I think, and I hope most Americans believe, that oversight of these banks is absolutely essential to make sure that we have money available and these banks are sound. The last point I'll make relates to the health care issue. I see my colleague from Colorado on the floor, and I'll be happy to yield to him in just a couple minutes. But the health care issue is one that is a frequent source of conversation among the political talking heads and elected officials here in Washington. Recently, many on the other side of the aisle have been holding almost daily press conferences. One was reported today in the Washington Post, where they get very worked up over the President's health care reform bill, which I was proud to support, and say that it's the reason for virtually every problem in America. Let me tell my colleagues on both sides the reality. Having served on the Deficit Commission, we cannot reduce the deficit and the rate of growth in our national debt without coming to grips with the cost of health care. Whether it's a family, a business, or any level of government, the cost of health care is breaking the bank. What we tried to do, and I think we will do, is to come up with a fair way to bring down the rate of growth in the cost of health care. I'm not naive enough to believe that we're going to actually bring down health care costs dramatically. What we're trying to do is to slow that rate of growth, and that is something we can achieve. I take a look around at what we are faced with when it comes to health care and the dilemmas we face. How many people before this health care reform bill had virtually no protection? One of the things we did in health care reform, which I suppose those who want to repeal it want to get rid of, was to say you couldn't penalize a person or a family because of pre-existing conditions. Children under the age of 18 could not be denied on a family policy because of a pre-existing condition. Many parents, like my own family, have lived through this and have known that if we couldn't get basic health insurance for our child, it could jeopardize the quality of care that was available. We changed that law. We said you cannot discriminate against children under the age of 18 because of pre-existing conditions. And we're moving toward eliminating that discrimination across the board. Is that unreasonable? I think it is realistic and humane, and it's a good thing to do. The second thing we did was to say that senior citizens getting prescription drugs under Medicare get stuck with something called the donut hole. That's a gap in coverage of almost $2,000 a year they have to take out of their savings accounts to pay for expensive prescription drugs. We're closing that hole over a period of a number of years so that seniors will have seamless coverage start to finish. That's part of health care reform, and those who are calling for its repeal ought to stand up and say exactly that they want to get rid of that as well. We also provide coverage under the Family Health Insurance Plan for children up to the age of 26. It expands the reach of family health insurance for recent high school and college graduates who may not have a job. It's an important coverage factor that I'm glad that we included in this bill. There's more that we need to do, Madam President, but to walk away from health care reform, to walk away from efforts to preserve quality and reduce the cost in health care is a step in the wrong direction for the quality of life of American families and for dealing with this deficit challenge which we do face. I sincerely hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will consider joining us and even offering amendments to and modifications to the President's Jobs Act. What is absolutely unacceptable is to do nothing. Unfortunately, many of them believe that's exactly what we should do. Don't let government get involved in any respect when it comes to the unemployment across America. Well, whether it's unemployment benefits, helping working families, giving incentives to small businesses to hire veterans and other people, putting money into infrastructure in America, these are things we can and should do together as a nation to bring this economy forward and to reduce the unemployment that we're currently facing. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Expressions of approval are not in order.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
If I had the time, I would contest a few of the things that my colleague from Illinois said, but I'm not going to make a political speech. I'm going to talk on the bill that's currently before the Senate, which is the China currency bill. So I rise today to speak on the China currency bill. China's underevaluation of a currency is a serious problem. It's an issue I've studied when I was a member of the Senate Banking Committee and now as a member of the Finance Committee. Earlier this year, I also had an opportunity to visit China with a number of my colleagues and learn more about this issue as we met with their government officials. It's clear that the efforts of the Chinese government to peg its currency against the dollar give unfair benefits to the Chinese exporters at the expense of U.S. manufacturers. The United States should take additional action to pressure their government to reevaluate the Chinese currency. However, it's not a new problem. China currency has been a priority for both President George W. Bush and President Obama. Through a number of venues, including the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade Talks, our officials at all levels have raised this issue with little response. This experience shows that action by the United States alone is not enough. We know that other major global trading powers have the same concern, but we continue to act individually. Just this summer, the German government made a renewed attempt to gain more flexibility in China's currency. The full European Union has followed suit, but they too have had little gain. But the United States and the European Union are not just the only ones concerned about China currency. A number of emerging economies, including both India and Brazil, have also made the same plea. So the question I ask now is, why are we considering a bill that puts the United States in a position of going it alone? That's one reason why I'm a co-sponsor of the Hatch Amendment number 680. This substitute amendment retains the designations included in the underlying bill that define a, quote, fundamentally misaligned currency, end quote, while giving direction to the administration to pursue action through multilateral channels. The amendment also thinks forward by making the issue of currency misalignment a priority issue in both our current trade negotiations and in future trade agreements. It's important that the United States not act by itself when it comes to pressuring China on this issue. I found in my experience that when it comes to economic policy in our globalized world, the multilateral approach is the most successful. That's one reason why I do not support imposing unilateral economic sanctions on any nations. I'm hopeful that the Senate will have an opportunity to vote on and include the Hatch Amendment in this bill. I also want to speak about an amendment I'm working on with my colleague from Oregon, Senator Merkley. Given that this bill is about enforcement of trade obligations, we filed an amendment that would encourage our officials to counter-notify those nations that have failed to report on the government subsidies that are provided to industries engaged in international trade and in competition with us. The World Trade Organization Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures establishes base rules for when members can provide subsidies. An important element of that agreement for compliance is a measure that requires each country to disclose information about their subsidies annually. China agreed to these obligations in 2001. However, since joining the WTO 10 years ago, China has only made its required notification once. That was in 2006, and it was largely incomplete. The amendment we have offered requires the U.S. Trade Representative to use its authority under the WTO subsidies agreement to counter-notify a nation that has failed to meet this obligation 2 years in a row. I am told the U.S. Trade Representative plans to act this afternoon by submitting information to the WTO that identifies China's failure to comply with this requirement. I'm hopeful that this will lead to accurate and consistent reporting by those governments that continue to disregard their trade obligations. This problem with reporting subsidies points to the larger issue we have with China, aside from currency misalignment. There are other significant Chinese policies that put the United States at an economic disadvantage and deserve our attention. One such policy I want to highlight is China's policy of giving value-added tax, VAT, rebates to artificially promote exports. On April 1st, 2009, China reinstated a 9% rebate of its 17% VAT tax on soda ash exports, another instance of China manipulating commercial outcomes through a government industrial policy. In 2009, during the depths of the global economic crisis, China's soda ash exports increased 9%, while global demand for soda ash was in free fall. That same year, the U.S. exports of soda ash fell 19%. This is just one of the countless examples where China's producers pay little attention to market conditions and instead are being driven by artificial incentives to export. Continuation of such a policy puts U.S. jobs in the soda ash industry at risk, which is why I've led an effort to have our government press China for the elimination of the VAT tax rebate on soda ash. The U.S. natural soda ash industry employs over 3,000 workers in Wyoming and California, another 100 dock workers in Portland, Oregon, as well as railroad workers who help transport soda ash. Half of all workers employed in the soda ash industry are dependent on exports for their jobs. The U.S. soda ash industry is an export success story. For the first time in 2010, the U.S. soda ash industry shipped more product to overseas markets than it did to domestic customers, and exports continued to grow in 2011. Domestic demand for soda ash is flat, so growth in the U.S. soda ash industry is entirely dependent on maintaining and expanding its exports. The United States is the most competitive soda ash producer in the world, but it will continue to be confronted by China's trade-distorting policies that put it at a competitive disadvantage. Specifically, China's VAT tax rebate on exports reduces China's production costs. It undermines U.S. soda ash exports in other markets. Moreover, Chinese soda ash is produced through a synthetic process that are both extremely harmful to the environment and energy-intensive. China's manipulation of its VAT tax rebate has been raised multiple times by members of this chamber, as well as our House colleagues. On May 31st, 2011, we asked Commerce Secretary Gary Locke and U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk to keep this issue on its agenda with the Chinese and fight for its elimination. I would seek unanimous consent to insert the text of the following letter to Secretary Locke and Ambassador Kirk in the record.
Without objection.
For over 2 years, China has provided its domestic manufacturers with an artificial incentive to export through the 9% VAT tax rebate on soda ash. When this incentive is removed, a truly competitive market can be restored for global exports of soda ash. I look forward to a lively discussion on this issue when the U.S. and China meet for the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade Ministerials this fall. Mr. President, Madam President, I don't want to underestimate the importance of the China currency issue. However, this debate cannot overlook the significant trade imbalances caused by other Chinese government policies that disadvantage U.S. industries. If you ask our officials, they won't hesitate to say that the currency issue is just the tip of the iceberg. There are countless tariffs, subsidies, and non-tariff barriers that keep the United States out of China at the cost of U.S. jobs. That's why I'm disappointed that my colleague, the Majority Leader, has not yet allowed members to offer the amendments on trade and jobs they wish to offer. Our economic policies with China extend far beyond the currency issue, and this bill should be the forum to raise and debate those concerns. This bill has been sold as a jobs bill and a trade bill, and therefore should be open to amendment about jobs and trade. Allowing amendments now is especially important, since this is yet another bill brought directly to the floor without the benefit of committee consideration. Our companies and exporters are among the best in the world, but it's tough for them to succeed when other nations allow competitors to ignore the rules that they've agreed to follow. Without a doubt, something needs to be done about currency misalignment in China. However, to be successful, we have to take a holistic approach. I'm hopeful that the Senate will consider these ideas, including the Hatch Amendment. If the U.S. continues to go it alone, we'll continue to have the same problems. We must consider legislation that not only authorizes U.S. action, but encourages the administration to pursue the currency issue with other nations that may have the same concern. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Colorado.
Madam President, I'm here today to talk a little bit about the state of our economy. I've spent the summer and early fall traveling around the beautiful state of Colorado, having town hall meetings, and listening to people who mostly start the conversations by saying, what is wrong with you people in Washington? Why can't you work together to actually get anything done there? They're really short on slogans these days, and they are desperate for us to turn this economy around. They know what the consequences have been of living in a country that for the first time in its history has had median family income falling at a time when their cost of health insurance has been skyrocketing, their cost of higher education going through the roof. And I thought the Wall Street Journal captured this in a way that I've been unable to, in a very vivid way on the front page. A couple of weeks ago, there was an article that was entitled, "As Middle Class Shrinks, P&G," that's Procter & Gamble, "aims high and low." That article is about one of the most iconic middle-class brands imaginable, Procter & Gamble. 98% of the households in this country have a product in their house that's produced by Procter & Gamble. Crest toothpaste, Head & Shoulders shampoo, Tide laundry detergent, Pampers diapers, Bounty paper towel, the list goes on, Duracell batteries, Mr. Clean, Madam President, Pepto-Bismol, Pringles potato chips, stuff that didn't even exist before there was a middle class in this country to buy it. That's the great brand of Procter & Gamble, and it's still a great brand. But this article is about how they are changing their business model to reflect the current economic realities, and economic realities that they believe are actually going to persist for some time. Just quoting from the article, which I'd ask to be entered into the record. Thank you. P&G's profits boomed with the increasing affluence of middle-class households in the post-World War II economy, the story that I was just telling. For generations, the article says, Procter & Gamble's growth strategy was focused on developing household staples for the vast American middle class. Now, P&G executives say many of its former middle-market shoppers are trading down to lower-priced goods, widening the pools of have and have-not consumers at the expense of the middle. P&G isn't the only company adjusting its business. A wide swath of American companies is convinced that the consumer market is bifurcating into high and low ends and eroding in the middle. They've begun to alter the way they research, develop, and market their products, Madam President. In other words, they have begun to alter their business plan with the assumption that the middle class is evaporating in this country and that their growth markets are the very richest among us on the one hand and the very poorest among us on the other hand. Let me close on this part just by reading the end of the story. To monitor the evolving American consumer market, P&G executives studied the Gini Index, a widely accepted measure of income inequality that ranges from 0 to 1. In 2009, the most recent calculation available, there was a 20% rise in income disparity over the last 40 years. Here's the quote. We now have a Gini Index similar to the Philippines and Mexico. You'd never have imagined that, says Phyllis Jackson, P&G's Vice President of Consumer Market Knowledge for North America. I don't think we've typically thought about America as a country with big income gaps to this extent. I don't think that's the way we've thought about America either, because that's not what America has been for generation after generation, decade after decade, going back to the founding of this country. Why do I come to the floor to talk about this, Madam President? It's because the debate in this place is becoming more and more unmoored from the facts. And people need to be reminded, I think, here, not in Colorado, but here, about what problem it is we're actually trying to solve. Here is our current economic challenge. The top line is our productivity index, going back to 1992, that blue line. You'll notice that it fell slightly during the recession, and then it took off again like a rocket. Why? Because firms all over the country were having to figure out how to do what they were doing, produce what they were producing with fewer people in order to survive in this recession. And the combination of competing in a global economic environment, which wasn't even present remotely in the way that it is today in the 1980s, required us to be more productive. The technological revolution that this country has spawned and led has allowed us to become more productive. And you can see this green line, which is gross domestic product, our economy actually has started to come back. You know, we're about two-thirds of the way back to where we were before this recession started. But what my families are feeling in Colorado and what your families, I think, are probably feeling in Missouri are these other two lines. This line is median family income, which, as I said earlier, continues to drop for the first time in our country's history, the last 20 years. What that means is that people are earning $4,000 and $5,000 less in real income at the end of the decade than they were at the beginning of the decade. Although I guess I should point out here as well that during the time that median family income was falling, average family income went up, reflecting the widening gap between rich and poor in this country, and reflecting a diminishing middle class. This line is unemployment. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that when this green line crosses again, and our GDP is where it was before we even had this recession, and it will, we don't have an answer for people that have been dislocated as a consequence of our economy becoming more efficient and more productive. These jobs are going to be created not by legacy firms from the last century, but by businesses that are going to be started tomorrow, and the week after that, and the week after that. And rather than having a partisan debate here in Washington, we should be having a bipartisan discussion about how to change our tax code and change our regulatory code to make it easier, not harder, for small businesses to be created and to compete, and to make sure that we're creating jobs here in the United States that are actually lifting median family income rather than driving it downward. This is what's happened to manufacturing in the United States since 2001. I invite anybody to look on our website if they want to look at these charts themselves or use them in their own meetings. But this top line is our manufacturing output. You can see even that's been rising. This, going back to 2001 to today, is manufacturing employment. Output rising, employment falling. And people in my state know that we didn't get here yesterday. This has been happening to them for the last decade or so. And they want us to be responsive to that. This is the median family income slide. In 1999, median family income was roughly $53,000. In 2010, it was $49,000. A $4,000 drop in real dollars since 1999. It's a 7.1% decrease. People are coming to me and saying, Michael, they may not know it's a 7.1% decrease, but they know they're earning less. They know that 10 years when they set out to save for college for their 8-year-old, they were expecting to be earning more at the end of the decade. Now their kid's going to school and they're saying, I can't afford it. Tuition is skyrocketed. I can't send my kid to the best school they got into. What a waste. What a waste. And I'd ask you, Madam President, whether any of us think we can afford another decade like that at the beginning of this new century. If we consume a fifth of the 21st century driving American middle-class income down, we're going to have a very tough time recognizing ourselves. This is something that's not noted by many, but I used to be a school superintendent, so I have an interest in our education. This is unemployment during this recession. based on educational attainment. The worst it ever got for folks with a college degree in this country was 4.5% during this recession. For people that had less than a high school diploma, it was 15%. For people with a high school degree, it was around 12%. Here's what else we've done over the last 10 years. This is our poverty rate in this country. This is why we have to move past the politics and into a substantive conversation about where we want to take this country. Together as Republicans and Democrats, these lines are people that are Republicans and Democrats and independents who are seeing their income driven down, who are seeing their wealth destroyed, and expect us to at least be able to have a civil conversation about it on the floor of the United States Senate. Did you know that poverty has increased by 46% since the year 2000 in the United States of America? There are today 46 million people in our country of 300 and some million that live in poverty. 35% of them are kids. 22% of the children in the United States today are living in poverty. A fifth of the children in our country are living in poverty. As I mentioned earlier, this hasn't affected everybody the same in our economy. This is the income growth, average income growth for the top 1% of income earners in the United States. This is the top 5%. This is the top 10%. This, and it seems insane almost, Madam President, to describe it this way, the bottom 90%. But 9 out of 10 income earners, 9 out of 10 income earners, this is what's happened to their income since 1967 in real dollars, in inflation-adjusted dollars. It has been absolutely stuck and flat at the bottom of this curve. All of which leads me to show you, I think, the most troubling slide of all, which I know is hard to read. But let me tell you what it says, and you can find it on the website. What it says is that we have not seen this level of income inequality in the United States of America since 1928. That's the last time that the so-called bottom 90% of earners, 9 out of 10 earners, earned roughly 45% of the income in the country. Here in 1928 and here in 2011. I don't think that our democracy can sustain itself with another decade or two of numbers like this. We have to do better than that. The bottom 90% of earners, as I mentioned a minute ago, are Republicans and they are Democrats, they are independent voters, and they expect their government to work for them. We can't create their jobs, but we can create the conditions under which they can create high-paying jobs here in the United States that is lifting families' income rather than driving it down. And that's what we should be debating here in Washington. Like you, Madam President, I have a deep concern about the fiscal condition that this country is in right now. We have $1.5 trillion of deficit, and we've got $15 trillion of debt, and don't have the apparent will to address that problem. We can address that problem. We should be adopting the kinds of policies that were recommended by the bipartisan commission, Bowles-Simpson, that together combined to take $4 trillion out of our deficit situation over the next 10 years, and did it by asking everybody to have a share in the sacrifice. We should be debating that on the floor of the Senate. We should be supporting the work that the Gang of Six has tried to do, not just because it will help us with our fiscal situation, which is critical, but because it will help us with our job situation. There's $2.3 trillion of cash, by some estimates, sitting on the balance sheets of America's corporations that's not being invested now because people are deeply worried that they can't predict what interest rate environment we're going to be in, because we can't get our fiscal house in order, and because the government is financing its debt on short-term paper, which easily could rise. Every rise in our interest rate will add $1.3 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. These are the facts. These are the facts. I've got a list of things we could be doing today. I won't dwell on it. We could be reforming and simplifying our tax code. We could be adopting a long-term research and development strategy. We could be investing, as Republicans and Democrats have done for decades, if not centuries, in our infrastructure. We could bring our public education system into the 21st century, which would matter a lot not just to our middle-class kids, but to kids living in poverty as well. Did you know that today, if you're a child born in poverty, whether you're rural or urban, it doesn't matter, your chances of getting a college degree are 9 in 100. 9 in 100. Which means that the day you're born, if you're among those 100 kids, out of the chutes, 91 of you are consigned to the margins of the democracy, the margins of our economy, if we don't change the way we educate our kids. And even if you don't care from their point of view what the implications of that are, and I deeply do care about that, as a father of 3 little girls, I think everybody should have an opportunity to graduate from high school, go on to college, and succeed. Even if you didn't care from that perspective, look at what happens if you don't have an education in the 21st century economy. Look at the unemployment rates that people are having to suffer through if they don't have a high school degree or a college degree compared to if they do have a degree. That's not going to change. The last time we were creating jobs in this country, we created roughly 5.3 million for people with a college degree, 3.5 million for people with something north of a high school diploma. No new jobs for people with a high school degree, and we lost jobs for high school dropouts. So if you care about the strength and success of the American economy, if you care about maintaining the mantle of the land of opportunity, if you care about the idea that the job of one generation is to put another generation into a position to succeed and contribute in the economy and the democracy, you need to care about what we're doing with our education system. We could be talking about that. We could be doing regulatory review to make sure that we've got a process to get rid of old regulations that don't make sense and put in the ones that do. I know in Colorado we have a huge interest in ending our reliance on foreign oil. Everywhere I go, people talk about that. Everywhere I go, people wonder whether it wouldn't be better to have an energy policy that created energy independence for this country instead of having one, or a lack of one, maybe a better way of saying it, that forces us to ship billions of dollars a week of oil to the Persian Gulf for the privilege of buying their oil because we don't have a policy. We could be thinking about advanced manufacturing. We could be eliminating the technology gap. We could be modernizing the FDA. There's no shortage of things we can do if we come together to do it. I see my colleague from Oregon is here, so I'll wrap up in 1 minute. But in order to be able to get to any of that, we have to knock off the political games and actually start working together around this place. You know, 2 days ago there was an article in the Washington Post, I think it was, that said that the United States Congress has a 14% approval rating. And the joke around here is, well, who in the world are those 14% that think we're doing a good job? But it's not a joke. This is serious. And there's a reason our approval rating is in the basement. It's because instead of working on the things that actually would drive productivity in this country, would drive job creation in this country, would most importantly drive median family income up instead of down. We're fighting with each other. And I want to go back to Colorado and have an answer for the people in my town halls who could care less whether I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican and just want me to do my job. The ones that are doing their jobs want me to do my job. The ones that don't have jobs want me to do my job. They want all of us to do our job. And I know there are people of goodwill on both sides of the aisle here that, if given the chance, will work together to do this. And the last thing I'll say is this, and then I'll stop. The rest of the world is not waiting for us to get our act together. The rest of the world is not waiting for us to decide whether or not we're going to have another debate that leads to blowing up the credit rating of the United States. They're not waiting for us to decide whether we want to sacrifice for the first time the full faith and credit of the United States of America. They're not waiting for us to decide whether we're going to invest in 21st century manufacturing. My colleague from Ohio just showed up and talks about that. They're not waiting for us to decide whether or not we're going to let them own the 21st century energy economy. They're going right ahead. And so our failure to act has consequences, and I believe it's time for us to come together, even though we're in a political season, even though we have a presidential campaign, and do our work on behalf of the American people and the people of my state of Colorado. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Oregon.
Madam President, before he leaves the floor, I just want to commend Senator Bennett for the outstanding work that he's doing on the budget issue, and particularly cite the fact that the cooperation the Senator from Colorado and the Senator from Nebraska, Senator Johans, are showing illustrates how important it is to try to find some common ground. That's what I'm going to be trying to do on the health care issue coming up, but I just want to commend the Senator from Colorado for his good work.
Thank you.
Madam President, as the Senate focuses on the budget, and certainly the American people hear the discussion about health care and particularly what is going on in the super committee, I want to take a few minutes to talk about how there is an opportunity to come together in a bipartisan way, and particularly with older people, to show that it's possible for them to get more of the care they want, particularly care at home, for a price that is lower for taxpayers, reduced costs for the taxpaying public. And this all came to light through an extremely important hearing that was held in the Senate Finance Committee, on which I served. Chairman Baucus took the time particularly to look at the care of those who are some of the neediest and most vulnerable in our country. They are the older people who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. In the fancy jargon of American, health care, they're called the dual eligibles. But I think anybody who looks at the American, health care system knows that these are some of those who are most vulnerable and most harmed when they fall between the cracks in the health care system. And the fact is, Madam President, the ballgame as it relates to Medicare, and I know the President and the Senate have spent a lot of time on these budget issues, is all about chronic disease. That's where the Medicare dollar goes. It goes into the treatment of heart and stroke and diabetes. That's where the money really goes. And millions of those who suffer from these devastating, illnesses are those folks that I'm speaking about, the dual eligibles, people who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. And millions of them are eligible for alternative services, particularly services at home, but right now a disproportionately large number of them get their care in the most expensive kind of setting, a place where they don't want to be, the hospital and the hospital emergency room. And the fact of the matter is, all over the country, in the state of Ohio, in the state of Missouri. Every single day, these folks are going in ambulances to hospital emergency rooms. Often they end up having to go life flight, essentially in the air to these facilities. And as of today, even though we've got more than 9 million of these individuals who are on both Medicare and Medicaid, according to Dr. Don Berwick at the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, only about 100,000 of them are being taken care of at home. So, of course, the Congress worked on the health reform, issue, and it was possible in that legislation to move to take a few thousand more than the 100,000 that are now being taken. But as Chairman Baucus highlighted just a few days ago, we ought to get serious about this and do a lot more, because older people, if we come up with approaches that allows them to get cared for at home, will feel better about our health care system and better about the decisions that are being made around here, and taxpayers are going to save money. Now, anybody who questions whether this is possible, Madam President, ought to look at the latest information that is coming from the Veterans Administration. They have, Madam President, 250 locations all around the country for the program that they use called the Home-Based Primary Care Program. The only difference, Madam President, between that VA program and essentially what is being done on the Medicare and Medicaid side is that the VA patients are even sicker than those who have been treated in the Medicare and the Medicaid settings. The VA program, the latest information, shows that caring for older veterans in the home has reduced hospital days by 62%, nursing home days by 88%, and costs by 24%. So let's just for a moment focus on that number, Madam President. Cost savings of 24%, while the older veteran gets more of what they want, which is to be at home for the care that they need rather than in these institutional settings, whether it's hospitals, hospital emergency rooms, what have you. So we have new information, specific, concrete information, and so colleagues know those who are specialists in this area at the University of Pennsylvania, who have looked particularly at the model that was recently included in the Affordable Care Act, they have said that if that model was fully implemented for caring for these individuals at home, it's their judgment that it would be possible to save in the vicinity of $30 billion a year. These are enormous sums of money, and to be able to make those savings while we say to older people in Missouri and Oregon and around the country, you're going to get more of what you want, which is care at home at a price that's lower than the alternative, that looks like a pretty good opportunity, Madam President. So now, as the super committee goes forward with its work, there are some questions about whether they need additional authority, additional legislative authority to do their work. If they do, Madam President, I think certainly the super committee in conjunction with both the full Senate and the House ought to give it to them. My own sense is they probably don't need additional legislative authority, but certainly there will be support in the Senate Finance Committee under the leadership of Chairman Baucus and Senator Hatch, both of whom have done very good work on this issue to move legislatively, whether it's in the super committee or through the full Senate, legislation that would allow us to dramatically expand this program. And, Madam President, I know the senator from Minnesota cares a great deal about seniors and these issues. Just a little bit of history. As I sat in the Senate Finance Committee just a few days ago, listening to how we ought to have some more pilot projects and some demonstrations and some studies, I thought about the days when I was co-director of the Oregon Gray Panthers, about 3 decades ago, had a full head of hair and rugged good looks and all of that kind of thing. And we were talking then in much the same way I heard the discussion going in the Senate Finance Committee about demonstrations and pilots and the like. A very good person at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Melanie Bella. And I basically said, in conversations later with both Chairman Baucus and Senator Hatch, I said, we've got to change this, Madam President, because if we don't, my prediction is that 10 years or so from now, they'll be back in the Senate Finance Committee having pretty much the same discussion. They'll be talking about a few pilot projects and a few demonstration projects and a few more studies, and by that time, the number of those who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid will be lots more than the 9 million that are eligible today. It will be many times that, and we will have wasted many billions of dollars more. So now is the time to do it. And I want to close simply by picking up on the point that Senator Bennett made about trying to find common ground. This question of independence at home has strong bipartisan support. In the other body, the principal sponsor, Congressman Ed Markey, worked with Chris Smith of New Jersey, Congressman Michael Burgess of Texas, 2 very strong conservatives. Over the years here in the Senate, I've been honored to have Senator Chambliss, Senator Burr, a number of colleagues on both sides of the aisle say that this makes sense, both for older people and for taxpayers. So in the next few days, Madam President, senators are each going to hear from about 100 health care groups around the country making the case for the Congress, starting with the super committee, going on through our work in both the Senate and the House, to have the Congress get serious about dramatically expanding, massively expanding the number of older people who are cared for at home where they want to be, which will result in savings to the taxpayers at the same time. And this is something that should not be allowed to be delayed or put off any further. After decades of talking about how it made sense and studying it and having some pilot projects and some demonstration projects, I think at a time when doctors come to the Senate President's office and patients come to the Senate President's office and say, you know, I'm very concerned about these cuts. I'm just convinced it's going to reduce access. I'm not going to be able, the providers say, to serve the same number of people. Older people we know are calling our office saying they're frightened about how it's going to affect them. For us to be able to come together in the Senate, in the kind of spirit that Senator Bennett was talking about, Democrats and Republicans, to say, look, here's something that works. We know it works. It was proven by Chairman Baucus's recent, hearing. We now know, based on the VA's important new study with respect to how you can care for older people at home, that we have an opportunity to significantly expand care for older people at home in this country and generate significant budget savings. It will be bipartisan. It's something that ought to be picked up by the super committee. It ought to be picked up by both the full Senate and the full House, and we need to do it now. If we don't do it now, if this is put off yet again after Chairman Baucus's important, hearing has once again opened the door to major reform, as sure as the night follows the day, Congresses 5-10 years from now will be debating exactly the same thing. I don't think that's right. Holding down health care costs does not have to mean benefit cuts or cuts to reimbursement. We've got a chance with this Independence at Home program to secure for older people more of the care they need in the comfort of their own home, and providers are actually rewarded with shared savings for delivering the kind of quality care that they have always wanted to provide. These ideas, by the way, are voluntary. No older person, no senior citizen is required to participate in, but we are going to get around to every senator's office, Madam President, the findings of this new VA study. It comes from 250 locations in each state and D.C., cost savings of 24%, hospital stay reductions of 62%, nursing home day reductions of 88%. These are documented savings for older people who are even sicker, Madam President, than those who would be served by programs outside the VA. This is the time. We have talked about it long enough. If the government needs additional legislative authority, it will be possible to give that through the super committee. I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, to pick up on the strong bipartisan support that exists for independence at home services, particularly for those who are eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. They are the most vulnerable in our society. Those individuals and the programs that they rely on, paid for by taxpayers, deserve better. We have the opportunity now to ensure they get it. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor.